In this video, we would be looking at a very interesting game played in the Grand Chess 2 Superbet Poland Rapid and Blitz 2024. And the game is between none other than Praggnanandhaa versus Magnus Carlsen. And it's a blitz event. The time controlled is 5 minutes plus 2 second increment. And the game is already very interesting, so I don't want to waste any further time. So let's start. So Praggnanandhaa is playing with the white pieces, and he starts the game with 1 e4. And Magnus replies with c6, the Caro-Kann defense. So all the players who likes to play the Caro-Kann defense, this could be a good time to watch this particular game. d4, d5, and we have the exchange Caro-Kann, bishop to d3, knight to c6, attacking the d4 pawn. So c3, e6, and now already knight to f6 is also a move, but e6 keeping the bishop locked because it has some other feature in the game. e6, bishop to f4, bishop to d6, trading of the bishop, knight to f3, and now knight to e7. So the whole point of playing the move e6 rather than knight to f6 was to put the knight to e7, short castle, rook e1, bishop d7, developing the final piece, knight to d2, and now we have the move f6. So the idea of putting the knight to e7 rather than on f6 was to push the pawn to f6, and now the idea is eventually to push the pawn to e5, having a good center. So after f6, both the players are pretty aware of this particular opening, so they waste no particular time. Praggnanandhaa simply plays the move b4, and now already a move like e5 is already a blunder because of b5, attacking the knight first, and once the knight moves, we can capture the pawn, takes, and now we can also capture the pawn on e5, and white is already a pawn up. So already e5 is a blunder. So b6 by black, because white's idea after b4 is obviously to play the move knight to b3, followed by putting the knight to c5, which is the best square for the knight. So b6 also a type of prophylaxis covering the c5 square. a4, rook to c8, rook to e3. Now a very interesting move by Praggnanandhaa. There could be two ideas behind the move of rook e3. One idea could be to simply make a battery on the e file, putting pressure on the e6 and the knight on d7. Another idea could be to move the knight from the f3 square and try to attack the black king. So after rook to e3, we have to move bishop to e8, trying the idea is to get the bishop to g6. So the whole point of playing e6, locking up the bishop, was to play the move bishop d7, bishop to e8, and exchange the bishop via bishop g6, by also playing the move f6, e6, so there could be ideas like e5 in the future. So already a very interesting theory and opening theory by Magnus Carlsen. So bishop e8, and now we have to move queen e1, putting pressure over here. So bishop to f7 first, defending the pawn, and a5 by Praggnanandhaa. The idea is pretty clean. You can't really capture the pawn because the threat is not to capture the pawn back, but the threat is to push the pawn to b5, attacking the knight. And once the knight moves back, we can already capture the pawn, and now you can't really capture the c3 pawn because of bishop h7 takes, and now I can simply capture the rook. So already in this position, after rook a5, white is already better because black is having clear-cut weakness. So going back, b into a5 is already a bad move. So we have knight to f5 by Magnus Carlsen, and now rook to e2. Like obviously you can go for capturing the knight in this position, but the bishop on d3 is much more important compared to the knight on f5, because the bishop on d3 covers every particular single light square, which is a very necessary case in case of white. So after knight to f5, now we have to move rook to e2, and now black plays the move knight to e7. So coming to the same variation, now can black capture the pawn because after b5, if the knight moves to d8, now rook a5 is not really working because after rook into c3, there is no longer bishop into h7, so after rook into c3, black is already better. But the whole point here is, at the place of capturing the pawn on a5, white is first going to play knight to b3, protecting the pawn on c3. The idea could be to capture the pawn with the knight, or first put the knight to c5 and then capture the a5 pawn with the rook, and white is pretty happy. So that's why b into a5 is still not a good move in this position with the black pieces. So we have the move knight to c to e7, knight to f1, protecting the pawn, queen to d7, and now we have the move a into b6. a b6, and now knight to g3. The idea is to simply trade out the knight. Now we have the move knight to d6, going back with the knight. The idea could be to put the knight to c4. So first rook a6, just trying to play on the a file. Rook to b8, protecting the pawn. And now h4 by Praggnanandhaa. Alpha 0 idea, just pushing the Harry the h pawn. Rook to e8, rook to a2, knight to f5. And now we have, like, in this position, we have the move rook a7, which leads to a similar idea by Praggnanandhaa. But I was thinking maybe he could have captured the knight in this position, takes, and now black is having a bad pawn structure. But the d5 pawn is not really weak because it's protected by the bishop. But it's like the same thing that happened in the game, so it doesn't really matter much. Rook a7 first, rook to b7, and now basically he played a brilliant move, which is knight into f5. And the whole point here is, after knight into f5, black is having many options. First of all, black can capture the knight with the pawn, he can capture the knight with the knight, or he can even go for capturing the rook. So first, if he tries to capture the knight with the knight, our idea is very strong. You can try to pause the video and try to find the best move. Okay, so bishop to b5 is the move. Basically deflecting the queen, because the queen and the rook are both the pieces are attacked, so you kind of have to capture the bishop. And now white can simply capture the rook. White is an exchange up and completely winning position. So after knight to f5, if at the place of capturing the knight, if black goes for capturing the rook in this position, white can already capture the rook, takes, knight takes, and eventually capture the bishop. So white is having two minor pieces against the rook, which is completely winning position for white. So rook into a7 is already a bad move. So black is kind of forced to capture the knight with the pawn, which gives black a really bad pawn structure now, because black is already having two isolated pawns and already double pawns on the f file. So rook to a8, you can't really capture the queen because the rook is pinned. Rook to b8, queen to a1, making a triple battery on the a file. Takes, and now queen to e8. So already we can already say that this position is at least slightly better for white because of black having a bad pawn structure. Queen to a7, keeping the queens on the board, attacking the b6 pawn. Queen to d8, protecting the pawn, and now knight to d2. Trying to maneuver the minor pieces because the queen is pretty nicely placed on a7. So trying to get a better square for the minor pieces. Knight to e4. And now here's my question. Try to pause the video and try to think, how will you try to continue the position? Because the position is like a normal position that happens in a game of chess. So how would you like to continue the position? So okay, the idea of black is to simply capture the c3 pawn. So if you decide to capture the knight with the bishop, it's a good idea, because in the end game, it's always considered the coordination of queen and the knight is always better than the bishop and the queen. So bishop takes knight is a good move. In the game we had f into e4, which I personally feel was not the best. Maybe the best would have been to capture the bishop with the d pawn, because first of all it opens up the bishop, but okay, at the same time it gives white a strong d pass pawn, but the bishop is somehow activated, and black has got his own ideas with f4 e3. So I personally feel g into e4 would have been much more accurate way, but we have f into e4, which is also fine. f4, f5, g3, h6, and now we have queen b7. Not the best. The best would have been knight to e3. I think after knight e3, Praggnanandhaa was a bit scared of f4 because you kind of have to capture. Takes, and he thought maybe this position is unclear. But after queen takes, the position is good for white, because after takes, white is already having queen d8 check, king h7, and already white can start pushing up the b pawn. And okay, going back, after knight e3, if black tries to play g6, defending the pawn, white is already having a strong move h5, takes, and white is already winning. So going back, knight e3 would have been the best, but queen to b7, g5. If f4 in this position, this would have been the best move by Magnus Carlsen if he would have played this move, because after takes, and now black is having a couple of checks. The position is a drawish position because e3 is going to come in the position, which gives basically the game ends in a perpetual. So going back, f4 would have been the best, but g5 takes knight e3 now. You defend with the bishop, and now queen to c6 attacking the bishop, king to f7, and now c4 the last option to move forward, or else white can also repeat the position. It would be a draw, but last try. c4 takes, and now d5. Obviously taking is a bad idea because of queen d4. So first pushing the pawn, and now queen to h6, threatening some ideas. So queen f6, and now we have queen h7 check. So if white tries to trade off the queen, this is a drawish position after it takes. Black can even play for a win after b5, because the knight has to go back, the king will get some activity, and the position is pretty good for black. Because the whole point here is, after b5, the e5 square is covered by the king. So there is no square for knight to get in. So going back, we have queen h7 check by Praggnanandhaa, and now king to e8 by Magnus, also defending the bishop. Which was a blunder actually. The best would have been queen g7. But the point here is, after takes, knight takes c4. Try to pause the video and try to find the best move for black in this position. Okay, so this particular move was, I believe, not have been seen by Magnus Carlsen. After knight and c4, b5 is already lost first of all, because after knight b6 attacks the bishop, pushing the pawn, and you kind of have to give up the bishop, and it's winning for white. And second, you kind of have to find the move king to f6, sacrificing the knight pawn, and after bishop b5, you will realize the knight is not having that much square. So for example, king g2, king e7, king d6, and now the knight is already getting trapped after king to c7, like knight to a8, king b7, and the knight is trapped. So white have to give a check where black can capture the pawn, and the position is roundabout even, heading towards the draw. This would have been the best, but it's already hard to calculate when you have to find the move king to f6 at the place of b5, sacrificing a pawn when it's a blitz game. So going back, at the place of queen g7, king e8, which was the most practical approach, but now check, and still queen to f8 would have done the job, but still the same thing. King e7, and now finally it takes, and now white is winning because of the pawn push. Check, capturing the bishop, and the queen endgame is winning for white, because the king is just too far away. White's having already a pass. So many moves were played now, but it was easy, I believe, for Praggnanandhaa to convert this game, because the king simply has been cut off. If the king would have been on g8, I believe the result would have been a bit different, but this position is easy for Praggnanandhaa to convert. But it still needs precision. Check, takes, and after queen e5, king f8, Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces decides to resign the game, because another queen is being made. Magnus can't really stop it. It's a draw. It's winning for white. So yeah, a very interesting game. If you learned anything new with this game, I personally believe Magnus Carlsen's opening choice was nearly perfect. The way he played the Caro Khan, e6, bishop d6, developing the knight from the e7, and now f6, maneuvering the bishop to e8. The idea is to play bishop g6, and I believe, like, if you're playing this particular opening with the black pieces, obviously your opponent is not going to be as accurate as Praggnanandhaa. So maybe you can get something like bishop g6, trading out the bishop, and eventually e5, and you can eventually go for winning on the game. But okay, it's Praggnanandhaa who Magnus was playing, so both the players were pretty great. Both the players having pretty great abilities. So a very strong game. So if you learned anything new with this game, make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel. I'm going to come up with these exciting videos like this. Subscribing the channel is free for you, but it helps us to motivate to make more videos like this. I'm going to see you soon, so till then stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess.